And welcome to another OfficeHours.global special program. Tonight, Chris Stone, the founder at castahead.net, is joining us. He's going to talk about his tool, which is designed to take long-form content and help producers and creators turn these longer podcasts, webinars, and live streams into shorts, basically to smooth out the process of finding those gems or nuggets of content to repurpose. Chris, welcome to OfficeHours.global. We're all excited to learn more about Cast Ahead tonight.
Bill, thank you for having me on. This is a thrill of mine. I've been a fan and subscriber of the show for a number of years, and so just got the chance. So thanks, Coach, for calling me up from the Bush Leagues. I'm here and ready to get into it and talk about repurposing. It's one of my favorite things in the world.
Well, you know, this is such an important content topic these days because we all know that eyeballs shift across the internet and people watch things for a period of time, but if it gets too long, they dial out. So engagement is often predicated on getting to the point, and that seems to me kind of why you designed Cast Ahead as a product. Can you tell us a little more about how you see Cast Ahead and what its wheelhouse is?
Right. So Cast Ahead sort of was born just prior to the pandemic. It rolled out of a career in Sony Music for 28 years. And so my entire job was to, have these music artists look and sound their best. And in a lot of cases, music albums, singles, tracks from a particular artist, it wasn't a situation where you would put a track out and then just kind of leave it, right? It was, we're going to do a Bill Davis remix of this, and we're going to pull in Tom Lord-Alge, and he's going to insert this radio station, and we're going to, do all these crazy things. We're going to do singles. We're going to do ringtones. Remember those? I'm dating myself right there. Who remembers ringtones? We would do all kinds of configurations, all to promote the greater album, right? And so in a lot of ways, it was so crazy to me when I got into this whole thing and I started producing podcasts for entrepreneurs, for keynote speakers, and all kinds of people that they would do a live video, much like this, and then they would just let it sit up on the digital shelf and hope that somebody would find it, or the algorithm gods would bless everyone else with your content. And I was like, this is just not what we're doing. And lo and behold, platforms like TikTok and such started realizing that short form content was a really great way to get people interested in the longer form content. So that's what we really started to focus on, was not just, hey, let's put out the audio podcast and maybe the video component of it. Let's start to break it apart. Let's start to use all parts of the pig and, use this content in the appropriate places, on the appropriate platforms where it makes sense.
Yeah, I've heard the term snackable content, and I think the audience desperately wants things that are engaging and interesting to see, but not that long process. When you decided to start making this, what was your list of things that you thought it needed to do to be successful?
Well, you see a lot of these new pieces of software that allow you to take your long form content and then just kind of plop it in, and then all of a sudden, look, I've got 25 pieces of content and it tells me that this is 95% viral, whatever their equation is that they do. And I always felt like, and no shade on any of these platforms that are doing it. I mean, it seems like every week there's a new one that pops up. But I felt like the way to do it was to not do what everyone else was doing. And I really feel like, you have to stand out, and a great way of standing out on these platforms is to do something that is higher quality, something that stands apart in terms of excellence, that looks like it's high quality. Because I think there's a perception of this vertical content and maybe short form snackable content that it's kind of disposable, and it's just not. It really isn't. You can actually tell a story in 59 seconds or less that creates a hook, that creates some intrigue for your key audience, that drives them to longer form content. It's true, Bill, you talked about people with shorter attention spans, and that is true by and large, but people are still consuming 3 and 4 hour long video podcasts on YouTube. And, we're seeing that that is absolutely happening. So I think it's about saying, okay, well, if you're going to do a 1 hour, let's kind of trim that down, a 1 hour interview with someone, you could be creating great content, but let's not just treat that as one piece of content. There's all kinds of stuff throughout that conversation that we can parse out and creatively put in front of people that can, actually, turn over and bring people into that longer form content.
I love the fact that you're talking about it in terms of short stories, not just short clips. And so, can you wrap around that a little bit for us? Is there some part of the algorithm or the process that is giving you a little beginning, middle, and end? Is that kind of part of the design, or how does it do this?
Well, so when I work with my clients, a lot of times people will talk, especially if they're keynote speakers, they understand what a pattern interrupt is. And I think a lot of people probably, you have a very smart audience, Bill, so they know about this kind of stuff. But a pattern interrupt can be more than just something that, flashes on the screen. It can be audible. And so a lot of times when someone is speaking, they'll say something like, hey, well, you want to pick up your pens, you want to be able to write this down. And then they're going to deliver something. Or there's, certain kind of, pattern interrupts they can say, if there's one thing you're going to you need to remember from this conversation, it's this. And so that is a pattern interrupt, an audible pattern interrupt that someone goes, oh, okay, this is about to be something very important, right? And so we don't coach people to, use all of the hooks that everyone else is using or chasing trends, because that gets exhausting if you're trying not to be, you're trying to be someone else and not yourself. What we train people to do is to use these pattern interrupts, because what that allows people like editors like myself to go in and I can identify this transcript, be able to pull out these pattern interrupts, and it becomes just great snackable content that becomes a hook specifically for the audience. It isn't trying to chase a trend like this is the Swiftie trend that starts with a hook like this, and then you got to do this, and here's the formula for you to be viral. It doesn't work like that, and it's exhausting to try to do that. So if you have people that are listening right now, they're probably exhausted by trying to figure out algorithms, and that's not what we do at all. What we try to do is create our own algorithms and try to create our own ways to hook the audience that we want to listen and view our content.
So is a piece of this working with the content deliverer to let them learn some tricks so that they can isolate these nuggets that become this excellent content?
Yeah, it's great because, Bill, I mean, I think a lot of times, it's like this in podcasting. You're going to eventually learn who your audience is and what resonates with them. And so a lot of times we're going to take that 1 hour podcast, we're going to pull it into, Descript is kind of like my engine that I start with. And I like to, look at and have Descript kind of pull out excerpts from the particular interview. And then we kind of determine, okay, this is something that works. This is a clip that works. This is a topic that works here. This is something that works here. And let's start testing these things out. Let's start going with the sprint. This looks like something that might work on TikTok. This looks like something that might work on YouTube as a short. This looks like something we could, extend out to more of like a 4 and 5 minute range that we can use as a highlight on YouTube and also on LinkedIn. And so we look at those kinds of things and say, what is appropriate for the platform? And then we read that back and we give it a good sample size and say, okay, we're going to go and at least try to do, 3 months worth of content on a particular platform, get the analytics back and kind of say, okay, this isn't working, but this is. Let's start to focus a little bit more on this content, because I think a lot of times there is some guesswork, especially initially with a lot of this content to kind of like figure out, hey, is this stuff working? And a lot of it has to do with the metadata that you're including in this content as well, whether it's the hashtags, the tags on YouTube Shorts, the titles. And so we're using AI to kind of determine the hooks and what's appropriate for those platforms as well, to try to make sure that we're not just visually trying to catch people as they're doom scrolling, late at night on TikTok or whatever. we're also telling the platforms, hey, this is appropriate for this type of person that might be viewing, this type of content.
Chris, it sounds like you're digging deeper than most of your competitors in this. Can you describe a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I think most of my competitors are just kind of screen pushers maybe, and just are like, hey, send me the content. I'm going to edit it, make it look great, and we're going to put it up on the platform. And I think we're all seeing how AI, especially AI in terms of video production, is kind of working. I have no fear in that because I'm knee deep in it every single day, and I want to understand how to apply it in what I do. And so I stay curious in every aspect of this business. My job is to serve a podcaster, and that may be somebody that has no time to deal with a podcast. They're traveling 28 days a month, and they're dialing in from their hotel to do a podcast guest, and they want to make sure that I'm handling everything else. That's doing the social media, that's doing all of that stuff. So I had to learn very quickly, Bill, how to do that, and I had done it for years at Sony. And, we had music artists that all they knew how to do was to go and record in the studio and then take the stage. They wanted their label to handle everything else. That's why you have a record deal. And so it was easy for me to understand that podcasters are content creators, musicians are content creators, and you just need to be sort of a one-stop shop, which includes doing the content afterwards.
So it sounds to me, Chris, like you're helping the originator recover bandwidth that they would otherwise be spending with all these peripheral things that aren't the heart and soul of what they want to do. You're offloading some of that work from them.
Everyone, Bill, hates to edit except me. I shouldn't say everyone hates to edit. I love to do it. I love to get into a story and craft it, and be able to craft and make specific B-roll, and then be able to not just send it to the creator and have them go, wow, that looks amazing, but also see how that can be a part of the DNA of that creator and see their success as a part of it. It really is something that I'm inspired to do. But most people, to your point, Bill, they don't want to do editing. They hate it. They're just like, I sat there and I did this. I tried to use Descript. I hate it. I tried to use Final Cut. I can't stand it. I think I had GarageBand once back in the day. I tried to put a compression plug-in on, and they just their brain borks out and they can't do it, and they lose the passion for what they want to do. And so they hire people like me to do it for them.
So describe the workflow that you use or the product uses. If I was going to explore this and I want to see if it'll help me, what would my workflow look like to get that done?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, most people have a long form video, either that they've recorded live or live to tape. So like this is a perfect example right here. So I'm actually, one of the things that I coach my clients on is to always record themselves. So I am recording myself here locally. Why am I recording myself locally? It's only going to be me. It's only going to be my audio. I know there's recordings that are happening on your end, Bill, where we've got ISO videos, and we've got isolated audio tracks. And so all of these things are being recorded, yet hardly any of them are getting used. So I coach everybody to record themselves locally. A lot of people, especially initially, Bill, are not comfortable on video. They just aren't. They just are. You would think after a pandemic where everybody was on Zoom that we would have a decent sound, and we have Insta 360 video 4K video cameras that are $140, and it's just like you can look like Bill Davis, ladies and gentlemen, live if you want to look like him.
God forbid.
Yes, and sound like him if you want to buy that amazing microphone that he's got. But I think this has been the problem, is that people still look like they're in witness protection. They still sound like they're in a cacophony tin can, and so they work with me to get themselves sounding decent. But we coach them to record themselves all the time. And so by the time you go on somebody else's show, you don't even have a show yourself. you're recording your answers to their questions, and that turns into all kinds of content. I think all of us have been on somebody else's podcast, and then you get done with it, and the host isn't doing anything with the files. And it's like, why? There's all this gold that is just absolutely sitting there waiting to be mined, pulled apart, and you can use for all of this stuff, all of this content. People are waiting to watch and listen to this stuff. And all you've got to do is hit record locally. I use Ecamm Live to do whatever I do, but there's free software that's available everywhere to record your screen locally, and people just don't do it. So that's what we do, is we take that long form video or a podcast that you've recorded. Hopefully you have the ISO videos. And so if people don't know, you have, again, this is the smartest audience in the world, but if you don't know what an ISO video is, it is just my video. It is just Bill's video. It is just Guy's video. Everyone here that is on here. And these videos can be pulled into a program called Descript, and then create a sequence. And so when we create that sequence in Descript, that allows us to, AI or Descript's AI called Underlord allows you to say, hey, I want you to find clips. Here's how long I want the clips to be. Here are the topics I want you to pull for me. And it goes in and it just pulls apart, however many clips you want, from there. And then you as a human could go in and start to make some real magic. And I'd love to be able to, have both the transcript and the words for me to be able to read and sort of discern and kind of create content that way, but also have that traditional sort of DAW look where you see the audio along the bottom and be able to edit that as well. It's a really great program. That's really where we start. Parsing that stuff out, creating the content there, putting the captions on it. Then I pull it out into Final Cut Pro, where I like to sprinkle a little Cast Ahead Chris Stone magic on it, because I think a lot of us that do this understand that there's just not one program that's the great Swiss Army knife for everything. You want like Descript, in my opinion, and Descript doesn't pay me, so I can be honest about it. Don't love their transitions. I don't love their music. There's a few things I don't use them for, so I have to pull it into Final Cut and use my plugins there and kind of make it sound and look its best.
Here's the next thing I want to dive into. When you get a 1 hour from one of your clients, this is just top to bottom, everything's there. What's your thought process to go through? Can you talk to us a little bit about, as an editor, as somebody who's trying to find these nuggets, what do you look for? What do you get rid of? And what's your kind of thought process along with this?
Oh, excellent question. So each client, each podcast that I produce has a specific, I guess we'll use the word avatar. I always think when people say avatar, I think of that movie with the blue people, but your ideal listener, your ideal viewer, and you think about what keeps them up at night. What are their problems? And what in this interview solves their problems? What is the medicine that solves these people's problems? What can serve somebody who is the ideal listener, and what can hook them and pull them in? That's kind of what drives me. I also want to make sure that this content, like I spoke at before, I need it to be excellent. I need it to sound great. I need the colors, the hex codes. If I'm creating B-roll, I use another program called Gamma, which is at gamma.app, and I pull the transcript from each one of the clips into Gamma, and I have it, it creates a presentation for me, but it also creates images in that presentation via ideogram and Flux and just a number of other AI image creators, and those images I pull into video creators like Kling and VO3 and others to create my own B-roll, because I want to be able to have that story where I'm not going to somebody else's created B-roll footage, or some GIF of some celebrity or whatever people would use in a particular, because everyone does that, right? How many of us have gone to YouTube and have seen thumbnails and looked at it and said, "Oh, somebody used Canva for that." I've looked at Canva and I see that exact thumbnail. Tons of people. And in this space, everyone is taking their content and they're putting it into particular programs. Again, I won't mention any, but there's popular programs out there that use, and then they get something that looks and smells and quacks like a vertical video, and they think that it's okay. And it is okay. It'll check the box, but it won't get you noticed. You have to go in and be able to discern that. So Bill, to really answer your question, I take a long time in most of my time specifically in the actual spoken content and saying, what will this it has to serve somebody. It's not just somebody saying something cool or somebody doing something cool or laughing or doing whatever. Sometimes we do that for some fun to kind of show that the show itself is fun, but it really has to serve a purpose. And I always say that before you repurpose, you must first have a purpose. And that's really what is the driving force behind what we do. And it's a driving force behind why my clients do the show. Before they have the interview, before anything, like, why am I doing this? Why do I have this guest here? Because my audience needs this, this, and this. And so that, as long as you know that up front, the content will be doing that.
We are a Q&A driven show, and so I wanted to let everybody who's watching know that if you have questions for Chris, you can pop them in through the regular show process. And while we're waiting for our first questions to arrive, tell me a little bit about your time back at Sony, and what was the biggest couple of lessons that you brought into what you're doing now from that experience there?
I would say that, the music business, as you know, and so I was in it, I started in it in the early 90s. And so the music business at that time was absolutely amazing. And so, large record companies like the one that I worked for, it was all centered around this round plastic disc called a compact disc. And that was the only way when a popular song came out for you to enjoy that particular song was to buy a $16 compact disc. Well, lo and behold, fast forward a number of years later, people were like, hey, I'm getting duped into buying a lot of compact discs for $16.99 when I only wanted that one song. And so, the music business just evolved like crazy. Obviously, Napster, bringing MP3s, the music business, went like, not in the toilet completely, but here I was working for a large music company that was primarily focused on physical product. So I pivoted to digital really quickly and jumped onto another sinking boat, ringtones. And so I ran the mobile business for Sony for a number of years, and then ran the streaming business. And so what that really taught me was that you can't just rely on one thing and be set one thing. You have to move like a shark in this whole thing. And in content creation, there is, even now especially, it's on hyperdrive now with AI, but I think you have to continue. You can't just rest and say, okay, I'm a podcast producer. And when I first started, Bill, I was just audio. Like, I wasn't even doing video. Even though I knew how to do video, I wasn't doing video podcasting because I was like, who wants to watch a video of two people sitting around a table with SM7Bs in their face? Well, turns out a lot of people. And so, so I had to learn how to do that relatively quickly. And so now we're talking about the social vertical video as well. But you got to be learning everything. It's crazy how much you just have to continue to do this to be able to serve your client that has more to do than just a podcast.
Yeah, I often think that the most important skill that anybody has these days is agility, because whatever you're doing today, I look back at things I was doing 5 years ago, and most of them are gone. The workflows just keep changing and changing and changing. And to that, do you have any vision of what you think are going to be some of the trends coming toward us that people need to kind of pay attention to make sure that they can jog to the right or left or up or down or back or forth side to stay in the flow?
Yeah, boy, if I knew the answer to that, boy, yeah, right. I think you put a number of zeros after my salary. Listen, I think it's drinking water out of the fire hose with AI right now, but I do believe that there's this podcast bubble that's out there is beginning to get a little bit played and potentially, about to burst. And I think that's good news for people who treat this medium, let's call it, as something that is respectful and something that they feel like, can be a professional medium, right? And I serve a lot of business people. And so, when a lot of these podcasts are people just showing up and chatting like somebody knows them already, I think there's a ton of that noise out there. And so I think this bubble's about to burst, and I think people will need to get creative about the shows. And so I would, encourage people, and I'm doing this with my clients as well. We're experimenting with a lot of different lengths of shows. I think everyone's used to firing up the microphones and having a 1 hour long conversation, and I love having all that content to work with for repurposing. But I'm not so sure it's a great idea, for your audience. So I think it's a check-in thing. It's a thing that you need to, especially if you're a podcaster, content creator, and you have a community that you built, which is absolutely paramount for you to do right now. That you are asking your community what they think about lengths of content. Hey, we're trying out a show. We're going to be doing a 12-minute thing, and it's going to have this segment. We're going to do this. Really want to get your feedback on this. Tell me what you think. And then be ready to hear that and be able to pivot and to really just kind of not get locked into your formats, you're doing everything the same, and everything is the same. You have to stay curious. You have to move like a shark. Where do I see it going specifically, Bill? I don't know. I mean,
and
honestly,
that is fair. It's changing so fast.
How
does
just
anybody
insane.
know?
It is. It really is. I guess we just need to have Travis and Taylor on every podcast to just see that the engagement go like that. That's where I see it going.
In our pre-show discussion, we joked about the fact that we just had to mention them as many times as possible to get engagement way up.
You're welcome.
We have questions starting to come in, so Guy Cochran is our reader for tonight. Guy, what do we got?
We got a question in from Florence Donald asking, when you advise clients about their vertical video strategy, what are the top 3 considerations you suggest?
Yeah, I mentioned it. Shout out to Florence. She's awesome. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier. If a lot of people are a little reticent to be on video. And I get it. I get it. Like I'm not a shy person, but I understand there are people that are. I think it's important that everyone records themselves and watches themselves. And I know we're the worst critics of ourselves, but I always encourage everyone to surround yourself with people that are going to tell you something that's going to make you better, and that you got to be ready to receive that information and get better. We can, whether it's imposter syndrome or whatever you've got in terms of like, why would anybody watch my video? Why would anybody? I'm not good on video. A lot of people that are running this show, this is a technological dream right here. How many people have talked to you and said, I'm not a tech person, right? You have to put in the reps. You have to get better. I didn't start as a tech person either, right? But you have to continue to get better at this thing. You're not going to automatically crank out amazing vertical videos and shorts. But you have to do the first one, just like you did your first podcast, which is probably not very good, but it's a good thing. Nobody listened to it. And so by the time you get to episode 200, you're sounding like Bill Davis and Guy Cochran, and you're amazing. But I always tell people, like, record yourself and use these intentional interrupts during the course of a podcast. Each one of the clients that I have, they have different sort of ways to go about it. That you kind of hear it every show, and it resets their brain in a way too. Like, I'm saying this and I'm going to deliver this, right? And the presentation is good, but the vertical video is great too. And it's just a great way to hook people in. So I hope that answers that question, Florence.
It does. It's an interesting thing that the presenters' brains change it. I know I've been surprised. I've been around the TV industry for many, many years, and I don't think I've gone through as many changes in my entire career as I have in the last 4 years, 5 years here at Office Hours. And I'm incredibly fortunate because we have so many people from all over the world who assembled here for what we do, and they're all sharers. They all told us, this is coming. The networks, the broadcast system is going to be diminishing over time, and this idea of video over IP and instant access to everybody around the world is gonna accelerate incredibly quickly. So we're all trying to figure it out. And it reminded me when you said, I don't know quite what's coming next. None of us do, because there's been so much change that we've seen happen so fast. If we don't have trends looking forward, is there anything, let's talk about the big bear in the room, AI and that kind of thing. Generative for video is sweeping through things. Do you have a sense of what that is going to be good for and what it may not be as good for?
I think it's great for, I use it all the time for, obviously when you're generating something in a lot of these cases, like a VO3 or some of these great looking models, you're getting about 5 seconds. And then you could use something like Runway Aleph, where you're taking that and then you're using it, getting different views from that. So I think it opens up, if you're someone like myself that edits a lot of video and you look at it and you see all the headlines that are on all of the thumbnails on YouTube. Oh, Hollywood's going to get roasted, and podcasting is over, live streaming is over, like it's all going to be taken over by this, that, and the other. They're looking for your clicks, and they probably got it. But I think the way I look at it is I'm utilizing it, and I'm saying, oh, wow, I wonder if during the course of this I can switch to a B-roll that shows an image of somebody, telling that story and then pulling in a different angle, and then I'm able to use the same aesthetic that I'm using, in the color treatments of my video, and I can actually create something that is visually, works and helps tell the story of what I'm doing. I think people that are doing that, actually using it from here's a real use case for utilizing this stuff. I think a lot of the stuff that we see, especially on YouTube, is like, hey, guys, this new thing got launched. Check it out. Here's a Yeti eating a banana while an ice cream cake goes in and out of his ear. Like, whatever. I mean, whatever the trend is, that's fun to watch. And you go, wow, that's pretty incredible that was done. Is there ever a use case for that, except for that YouTube video? Maybe not. And yeah. I think so. That's really kind of the way I look at it. I love it, and I can kind of go down rabbit holes and go, I had just spent 2.5 hours doing this, that, or the other. So you got to be careful on that and really kind of look at it from a tactical and a more, I guess, practical way of saying, hey, how can I use this for what I do? And then you end up creating something like I'm doing with the vertical video of saying, hey, I'm using these video models to incorporate the stuff into that, but I'm not using it just to generate slop where somebody sees, oh, they took a still picture, they animated it and created a short, and they got 1 million views, and what did that do? Probably
what, there's
nothing.
slop on the internet? I'm
Yes.
aghast. Yes. I'm so surprised. Yes. We have a bunch of questions piling up here. So, Guy, what's next?
Got one in from Josh Kaufman asking, how do you measure whether short form is actually moving people towards your long form?
Well, in YouTube, there's a way to do it, and so you can mark in a YouTube short, you can mark it as a related video to the longer form. So that's what we see, especially on sort of more sales-related, longer form podcast interviews. And so we'll get a really good clip out of that, and then you can mark it before you upload the short. You can mark it as a related video, and then and analytics will tell you if that's generating more views of that longer form video. On other platforms, it's just impressions. I mean, it's just, there's not really an engagement. There's not really a way for you to say, oh, I posted this on Instagram Reels, and that pointed somebody over to the podcast. So I think this is where it kind of goes back, Bill, to where I talked earlier about creating content that's appropriate for the platform, right? So what we don't want to do is we don't want to say, I'm going to create this reel and it's something that is appropriate for YouTube, and then say that that's going to work for TikTok, and that's going to work for Instagram, and that's going to work for all of these, Threads or Twitter, X, whatever, and think that you could just spray and pray and that's all going to work. I think what we have to do is understand, if you're on Instagram, you may not be wanting this content. You didn't open up Instagram to see Chris Stone talk about video production. You probably were opening it up because you're just kind of like wasting a little time while you're standing in line at the DMV or whatever, and all of a sudden, who's this knucklehead on my feed? So you have to be you have to have a concept of, if I'm creating this for Instagram and it's a podcast, is this appropriate for this platform? Or if I really want to do something, appropriate for Instagram, really digging into that. And I just have found that generally Instagram's not a great place to promote podcasts because it's just not a place for podcasts. YouTube, on the other hand, very much a great place to promote podcasts.
That to me is fascinating because there's so many of these popping up, and what can you give us just your off the cuff kind of idea? What is a Discord for? What is Instagram for? Just in general, we're not holding you to this is absolute truth, but when you're going to play something on one of those platforms, how do you kind of shorthand what that platform is all about?
Yeah, I think, obviously, like TikTok, for instance, if we're creating something for TikTok, we have, it works sometimes, but generally it's really just not, you're generally not going to get a lot of people that are going to watch a TikTok video and say, I want to go and find that YouTube video of the podcast, or I'm not going to go and listen to a longer form a version of that podcast. So the content,
so you don't see a lot of audience crossover between those two.
Absolutely not. No. And so because again, TikTok is more entertainment. So the content that we try to do on TikTok for our clients is more entertainment, and some of them just aren't entertaining, to be honest. No. I'm sorry, clients, if you're listening to me, they're not. And I'm not saying do some trendy dance or anything like that, but it's why. And what skews these platforms in relation to podcasts is comedy. So a lot of times, comedy podcasts do incredibly well, right? Because they're entertaining and they're great for TikTok. But like business and tech, not great for TikTok podcasts. It's just, or I should say, their podcasts are not good for TikTok content. Instagram, kind of the same thing, unless you have something that is aesthetically pleasing, and it's just like the quick pattern interrupt stuff is great for TikTok, but it's got to be entertaining, right? YouTube, people can sit back a little bit. It's a wider, wider group of people that the algorithm treats. And so I think YouTube is absolutely the place that we spend most of our time, promoting the Shorts platform. Plus, it has that thing where you can relate it to a longer form piece of content. It's just there's too many degrees of separation, and it's completely invisible in terms of like Instagram and TikTok, where you're just throwing the content, and saying, please, algorithm, do something for me. And you just don't know. You can look at engagement. You can kind of look at the views. You can kind of see what's happening. You can maybe it doesn't even allow you to paste a link in there. So the only way to get someone in terms of a link is hoping they might go to your bio or going on your story and clicking a link. It's way too complicated for people. And so I think Instagram, you just got to treat it like, this is my way of getting impressions. This is my way of showing my face and say, oh, that's the podcast guy. And so if you treat it like that, and this is my way of getting more of that marketing impression, you can kind of sit back and kind of see how that goes. But YouTube is a great way of tracking it, and is a great way to get people to point to the longer form content, and because it's less clicks. Let's go on to our next question.
Yeah, we got one in from Florence Donald asking, when you're deciding to create a short form story, what's your approach to figuring out the story to tell and choosing assets /B-roll?
The story comes to me, like, so when I, like I'm a part of these productions, and so I'm here, in the background, and so I'm hearing it. I'll make notes. I'll say, oh, I really like this, and I'll do a timestamp. That happens sometimes, but sometimes you're in the midst of doing a production, you're sharing screens, you're pressing buttons. All my producers behind here, they're all like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing right now. But, so you get busy, you don't really worry about it. But like historically, you could have a show that's 3 years ago, and we create content and we just kind of parse it out for years and schedule it for years. So what we do is we pull it into Descript, and when I ask Underlord to create clips, and I know the interview was with someone that might have been in the mattress business, I may type in things like entrepreneurship, mattress, furniture, like whatever, and it will parse out 10, 15 clips from that. I'll go in and I'll be like, nope, that doesn't work. Nope, that doesn't work. And all of a sudden, the story will come. And somebody will start saying, hey, I remember when me and my brother, we came over from overseas, and they start to tell a story. And I'm like, here we go, right? And so I see, okay, the clip is 1:48. I start to parse it down. Bill, you talked about, maybe how we edit it a little bit. You can do in Descript, you can pull out filler words. And so on short form content, not a bad idea to do that, but I wouldn't get too aggressive with pulling out all the ums and the uhs and the you knows, because as people are listening to the way I talk, I kind of say that a lot, and that's how I talk. And so sometimes it's one of those things where if you start to pull out that, you start to not sound like yourself. So I get a little less aggressive there. But in terms of what Florence was talking about in B-roll, I imagine what it should look like. All right. And so this is part of the vision of what you do is, instead of saying, here, program X, tell me, spit out something for me, somebody may say something. On the latest one that I made, Tanya Smith started talking about AI should be your companion in terms of how you structure a podcast. So I was like, okay, let me pull that into Gamma, and I created an image of her sitting at her computer while a really cool looking robot was sort of sitting next to her watching her screen. So I took that screenshot, or I took that image that was created in Flux, and I pulled it over into Kling AI. And I said, I want to create the scene where the robot stands up and puts its arm around the content creator. Because what that does is it creates a 5-second thing while Tanya says, hey, AI should help you along doing this. And so while instead of just her face talking, there's a 5-second pattern interrupt that brings in the scene that tells the story.
That makes perfect sense. Next question.
Josh Kaufman asks, if short form is dominated by clickbait, how does a new creator get noticed without resorting to gimmicks?
Yeah, there's a lot of noise out there. There really is. And I talked about it earlier. I think it's exhausting to try and be somebody you're not. And you may catch something, right? But it's for that second, and then you think, okay, well, that caught, so now I'm going to do more of it, and then it doesn't hit, and then what do you do, right? I think the authenticity, always be yourself, but be better at creating, and so that's the way I am. I don't try to create the action figure thing that came out, like especially now with AI, everybody's like, oh, I'm creating this cartoon version of myself, or I'm creating, oh, look at this is a new viral thing of you slicing a hamburger, or this is me as an action figure. It's like everybody's doing that, and then it just is played out. It's over, and it's over more quickly now than it ever has been. And that kind of stuff is, maybe it's fun, I guess, if you want to do that. But like a trendy kind of thing on TikTok, whether it's a dance or let's chase the here we go, Taylor and Travis engagement, whatever you want to do. Look at the numbers are going up, Bill. This is amazing. Or any of that stuff. If you chase that, it's just exhausting. But I do believe that there is success leaving clues on a lot of people's content. I think, if you're passionate about something, follow somebody and get some influence. Don't make a Xerox copy of a carbon copy of a written napkin of somebody else. Like, do your thing, but you can use people's influence, kind of say, wow, yeah, I wonder what camera Bill's got, I wonder, is that a SM58 he's got behind him? I don't know, but like techniques that people are utilizing maybe on TikTok that you're like, ooh, how did they do that? Investigate, get curious on how to do that. If it applies to yourself, don't look at it and go, I would never do that. Then don't do it. I think a lot of people think they have to be trendy and they have to chase trends and they have to say, here's what you do, here's what you do. But you have to realize, especially when you look at YouTube feeds, they're giving you the best of the best. Every time you see that and you look at your homepage on YouTube, you're seeing the best of the best. This is the 0.5% of everything out there. So you have to understand, it's not as big as you think it is for you to jump in and start creating authentic and excellent content that eventually rises above the noise.
You said the word authentic, and to me, authenticity is the one thing that everybody has that is unique to them. And I'm sorry, but the algorithms, no matter how sophisticated they ever get, we're going to create something out of nothing. Most of the time, these large language models are surveying a lot of things and figuring out what the averages are. And you're not average, no matter who you are, no matter what you have to offer. You're not average, you're you. So we have another question.
All right, on this one, it is for me, so I can give you a little background just so you can answer it a little bit better. So we have a shorts team here on Office Hours, and what we're doing is we're using Opus clips to scan the daily show, and basically it does what you had said earlier, that marks it as 99%, 98%, like, hey, we think that this 15-second extract, and what I'm figuring is that it's a lot of tone and rate of speech is what drives that metric. So if somebody gets excited, it gives it an A+, or there's some other metrics in there. And so knowing that you've watched the show before and for a while, and that we have a back catalog, which I would call a treasure trove. I know Alex Lindsay doesn't really want to go back in time. He loves the new stuff. And so to me, there's this whole thing of query deserves freshness, which is Google's way of saying like, hey, we're going to, give you this this boost if you have relevant news. In fact, our top short was based on news. So it hit, and it I won't say went viral, but it's our most viral was something that was topical for that day. So the question that I have here, I'll go ahead and read it. It says, Office Hours is producing YouTube Shorts. If we were a client, what would be some of your top recommendations to maximize reach, views, and new subscribers?
Yeah, it's interesting that the topical news item hit like it did, and it's interesting that was picked. Let me back up a little bit. You talked about Opus giving you the numbers and as the potential viral clips or whatever they call it. Descript does the same thing with their ranking system. I use my own ranking system, which is let me discern what I believe serves the audience, and then I look and see what actually worked. And so, like, before, I just feel like if somebody's going to rate of speech or whatever, it's kind of like I just don't trust it. I feel like what that is that's just another easy button for someone to hit. And I really believe that while you can use a tool like Opus or Minvio or Descript, there's a million of these things. You have to go in and use your human discernment based on what your audience would want to hear and see. Specifically for what you're talking about, Guy, for your team, I would continue to do, if you've got a longer form piece of content that's 3 years old, you're not going to use something topical, right? And so when I talk to my clients, I try to have them use evergreen language. It's going to happen during the course of a conversation where, like, somebody will say something that just happened that week, or, I've got one that's, believe it or not, is a mattress store, and they'll say, hey, it's Labor Day. And it's like, okay, now we're talking about Labor Day. I'm never going to be able to repurpose that because after Labor Day, it's like nobody cares. Like, why is there a clip and he's talking about Labor Day? So if you're talking about the latest, ChatGPT 5.0, well, 6.0 is going to come, probably next week. And so anytime you're talking about that, you've dated yourself. And so I think that's a little bit of a loss of trust, I think, if somebody sees that clip and is like, why are these guys talking about 5.0? 6.0 has been out for a month, And so I think a lot of times when you've got evergreen content and you're talking about something that is, works for a number of years. I mean, I've watched this show and you guys have talked about Final Cut. You guys have talked about specific pieces of content, but you've also talked about stuff like, content creation in general, or, frame rates and things like that, where it's like, these are things that never change. Right. And so, well, maybe not never. Tech changes, fairly rapidly, especially lately. But I would suggest taking that old content and finding out what you have in there that is evergreen, that still resonates today. And these programs allow you to do that. You pull that in and you're kind of in, you could even in a program like Descript, kind of like pull out, prompt it. You prompt Underlord and say, I don't talk about, anything that is in relation to this, but do talk about something, pull out something that is like this, and kind of see what you have and utilize the evergreen content, but also pepper in some of that new stuff. Like if you're going to be doing this every week and you want someone to go back to your weekly or daily or an episode from the previous week or something like that, do a topical one every single time and mark it and know that, ahead of time, we're going to be using this, and I'm going to be talking for a couple of minutes about the latest release from Ideogram or whatever that is. And see if you can continue to, like, is this something people want to view and to hear from? And that may drive some more views for the longer form.
We have another question in the hopper here.
All right. James Hicks asks, what are your thoughts on sharing short form content on all of the platforms? Do you focus on any particular destinations like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc.?
We covered a bit of that, but is anything top of mind now? What's your favorite place to post these days?
MySpace.
MySpace. The 1980s called and want their reference back. Chris.
They're going to release vertical video. Everyone else has, right?
Yeah.
Actually, believe it or not, it's LinkedIn. And, I do love the fact that YouTube has, and shout out to Dr. Hicks for joining. Thanks for that question. YouTube does have the analytics that allows me to get a better read on that. But LinkedIn is where, especially for me, that's where a lot of, more business-related clients come from. And you can get a little bit more verbose with your content. You can't get carried away with that. But I think that's the kind of thing where you can kind of lean back and really talk about the interview in a little more depth than you can. I mean, you can't do that on YouTube. I mean, it's worthless. I mean, you could paste 5,000 characters in there, but what's the point? Nobody's reading that stuff. And the dark horse in all of this is Substack, and I'm not sure if you guys have covered Substack.
We've talked about it a little bit. I know it's coming along very rapidly these days. I'm seeing more and more references to it in just the stuff that I normally read.
Yeah, and so you can go live on Substack, but you can also, and so when you go live and it ends, it doesn't live on replay. It goes to your drafts, and then you can do written word to support the video. And the interesting thing about people that are on Substack is they read first and then watch and listen. So your podcast can be on there, your video can be on there, but they're reading the article about the show, and then the open rates are insane on that. And so, and the other thing too is you're getting email addresses there. So like if you're doing a LinkedIn newsletter, for instance, you're not getting those email addresses if you're looking to have them on your email list. But Substack is kind of that dark horse. We found a different clientele there, one that's more focused on the written word, and we're seeing their analytics are really good as well. So we're seeing how long people are watching these videos, the open rates on these emails as well. But back to what James is saying, I think, as someone who is doing this and maybe just now experimenting with this, like, hey, now I'm taking my content, I'm going to be creating more short form, I suggest to go everywhere and then, give it a good sample size and then kind of see what's resonating. If sometimes we think our audiences aren't on TikTok, and you're like, wow, all of a sudden I've got a bunch of followers and some engagement here. It turns out, I do have some people here. And other times you're like, hey, Facebook, I guess, is not for me, or not for my content. This is not working for me. And certainly not MySpace. I would never post on MySpace. I don't think you can anymore.
Yeah, we have another quick question in.
Harshi Trivedi, and he asks, how does your product work out for someone that may have vision loss? Does it work with screen readers?
Oh, that's an interesting, I think what we do, I mean, everything that we do, and we didn't even mention this, is captions, and so, yeah, the screen readers, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we do captioning, and, certainly from an audio perspective, and this is something that I didn't mention either, is that audio is absolutely the most important part of what you do in terms of these. I know we're talking about shiny objects, and we're talking about all of these things flying around on the screen, and transitions and captions and faces and AI, but audio is the most important part of all of this. So if somebody, if you've got jittery audio, if you sound like you're in a tin can, and you've got your music cranked up way too loud in the mix, you don't have it properly sitting around the voice, you're not treating it for audio, it's not gonna resonate with the right audience. It's part of the excellence, I think, in terms of doing this video.
We talk about that almost every day on the show, and that's why we do audio level checks for each and every one of us who comes in every day, because I 100% agree. The audio carries most of the content in these things. We have another question in.
Tony Mobley asks, how do we get this great message to regular people? We all get it, but they are in the good enough mindset.
Oh, how do you fight against that client who says, just toss it out there, it's good enough?
I don't do it.
Good.
No, I do get a lot of that. So, and again, I'm sure there's a number of producers that watch and listen to this thing, and you do a sound check, and somebody shows up, and they've got their laptop microphone and AirPods, and that's going to be not just a nightmare in post, but just for a live video, it just doesn't work. I think you can't insult anyone's intelligence, and we have to realize, like, a lot of people don't do this for a living, and we have this curse of knowledge. We think, well, geez, here it is, 2025, surely we understand mic technique, and you should have a dynamic mic, and you should have headphones in your ears so you don't get the slapback and feedback from your speakers. Surely people know this. They just don't. And so I co-host a show called Dealcasters, and we go live on Amazon, and we talk about all the great new tech that someone can use for their podcast. But we go over this every single time because people just don't know. They say, "Hey, what's that microphone you're using? So I can buy it." Like, well, hey, hang on. Let's talk about your room treatment. Let's talk about what you're using it for. Let's talk about your budget, because we may be able to get into this, that, and the other. But I think we're never Tony, it's a great question. The good enough mindset, I think in a lot of ways, I started with a good enough mindset until somebody sat me down and said, hey, and listen, this isn't working here. This isn't working here. And I'm like, wow, okay. And then I decided to get better. Not everyone does that, unfortunately. One of my mantras is from a speaker named Craig Rochelle, who runs a Global Leadership Summit. He's a pastor of a church in Illinois, and he did a whole talk on perfectionism, and the acronym was GETMO, and it stood for good enough to move on. And that helped me, actually. That helped me with my perfectionism. I decided to go live from then on because I wanted to not over-edit myself, and wanted my clients to do that, because the only way to get better than good enough is to get the next one done and the next one done and get in the batter's box again and start taking swings. I don't know if we're going to convince everyone until they get in the batter's box and swing every time.
We have one last questions to deal with. We're almost at the top of the hour here, so dive in.
James Hicks asks, what do you think is the next evolution of digital content creation?
Oh, a small question here. You should be able to toss this off in 30 seconds, right, Chris?
Hicks New Media is the next evolution. Dr. Hicks, we appreciate you you joining in. I actually believe that true live video is, and I don't mean just turn on StreamYard or turn on Riverside and just, restream or whatever, but like actual creative live video that, entertains, educates. And this isn't, that's not like brand new. I know this is not like earth shattering of an answer, but I think with this AI slop tsunami that we're in the middle of, it's really the only way that we as humans can actually talk about our experiences and connect with people and create these communities. And it's not a piece of software that I think is coming in the Chat GPT-6. Did you hear that it's going to be able to cook dinner for you automatically, and agents and all of these things. These are great, and I'm going to utilize all of them. But I think in this space, it is about actual live engagement with your community and being creative within that, educating, entertaining, making people laugh, cry, feel, and feel connected with you.
I desperately want a T-shirt now that says "Surfing the Slop Tsunami." I love that metaphor. So,
I'm going to make that T-shirt.
We've been talking with Chris Stone, the founder of castahead.net. And Chris, if people want to contact you, engage with you about more of what you do, how do they get a hold of you?
I'm at castahead.net, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and happy to connect with you there and talk about more of this stuff. And guys, it's been an absolute thrill. Only a couple of knuckleballs, but a lot of softballs, so I appreciate that. You guys had me on my toes. I expected that, but I appreciate it.
You've done a magnificent job, and it's fun to learn about what you're dealing with these days. Our thanks to the crew in the back, Jeff, Robert, Alan, Dave, Peter, other people who have been around who make officehours.global possible every single day. We thank everybody in the back end, and we thank you, those of you who listen and watch. We appreciate it. Without you there, we don't even know what we're doing or why. So we'll be back with our regular shows every morning, our special shows in the evening occasionally, and hopefully we will continue to bring you exciting and interesting guests like Chris Stone in the future. That's it for today. Thank you so much for paying attention. We'll see you next time.